Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Thursday morning to you all. Hope you guys are waking up and feeling good out there this morning and staying warm. It's very cold for a lot of areas, especially areas that typically are not as cold as they are right now. There's some places that are in the single digits, pretty far south, the low teens. It's been like that the last couple mornings with the snow cover for areas pretty far south. But listen, it's been a wild last few days of weather. Tracking this historic winter storm. Some areas pretty far south got 8 to 12 inches of snow. But we're finally past it. I had a period of rest yesterday where I took a long nap, went to bed early, got a good 10 hours of sleep. So I'm feeling much better. Was battling the sickness over the weekend, and then just kind of going through the high amounts of energy with tracking this winter system that affected my area too. I got about an inch of snow, a little bit of an underperformer, if you will, for my neck of the woods. But listen, snow is snow, and I was definitely happy to see it. But the big question is, what's next? Everybody's certainly, I'm not going to say everybody's wondering that, but I'm sure a lot of people are. Are we going to have any chances as we round out January, get into February? February's kind of been a month that really hasn't done anything across at least the eastern U.S., definitely the southeastern U.S. It's definitely just been like an early extension to spring the last several Februaries. In fact, the last, I would say, February that brought any winter weather across my state here in South Carolina, as far as a high impact event, was I think like 2015. So it's been a while. So is this February going to be any different? We're not going to get too deep into that month, but we will extend this update into like the first day or so of February. So the first thing we'll talk about is what I'm eyeing next, and then we'll start to discuss today's forecast, and we will get back into doing that and get into the normal swing of things, as I kind of had to leave a lot of people hanging that tune in regularly for your daily forecast. But we're back on the normal flow of things, and that's the way we're about to start doing it again. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put it in the comments below. I'm going to do my best catching up with things today over the next couple of days. But of course, I'm not going to be able to go back and read all the comments since dating back to about, I think Friday. I think Friday was when I stopped. I mean, it's crazy. That's almost been a week now. So, of course, I'm incredibly behind. But I will try to get to a lot of them. So let's get rocking and rolling. So sorry about the long intro. I just, was yapping my jaw there. But anyways, let's start this off by discussing the 6 to 10 day outlook, temperature and precipitation wise. So I like this period for our next storm system to track. This is going to be a major storm system, major winter storm. I'm not quite sure, but we're going to discuss what we're seeing right now. So this is January 28th through February 1. So almost to the month of February. Pretty wild stuff. Some moments I want to say that this month is really dragged by, and then others, I want to say that it's just flown on by. But when I think about it, it feels like New Year's Day was like 2 months ago, but it really wasn't, obviously. But January 28th, February 1. So in the blue area, this is where they have some confidence, where they're leaning towards below average temperatures. All right, so you got that in the southwest. I'll tell you why here in a second. In the extreme western U.S., the west coast. And then you got it for the northeast and portions of the mid-Atlantic. And then you got the area where they're leaning towards above average temperatures in the, the orange and dark orange colors. So this is 33% chance of temperatures being above normal. This is 40. This is 60. And then leaning towards above average temperatures along the Gulf coastline down into Florida. Then you got the grayed out area, kind of the no man's land, right? This is where they just kind of, it technically says a 36% chance of temperatures being near normal. So going for around average temperatures for this time of the year for this area, which for a lot of areas can still be quite cold. So you look at that and you say, okay, well, I'm not seeing overly cold temperatures. And I would say that you're probably right, but there could be some tweaks with this, especially later today into tomorrow afternoon. The precipitation outlook for this time frame, it makes sense to me. I think you're going to continue to have an active southern jet where you're going to get a lot of energy kind of riding to the south, and we're going to have a cold air source to the north. So I just continue to think we'll have, I don't want to get too ahead of myself here, but I think a lot of this, you're not going to get this historic winter storm in this setup that's coming up. You don't have that deep cold air source But who knows? You can still get some winter weather out of this pattern, especially on the northern fringe of this. Even though that they're not calling for well below average temperatures, it's still around average too. In some areas, maybe slightly above. In some areas, maybe slightly below. But definitely leaning towards wetter conditions to round off this month, to getting into the first day or two of February. This darker green, that's a 50% chance of precipitation being above normal, 40, 33. So I show all this for a reason. And we're going to go into this. And, maybe this is the part that confuses some people, but I'm going to try to just explain it in a way where it's not as confusing. So the blue you see on your screen, that's lower pressure, maybe a storm system. Typically brings some colder air with it. A lot of times it brings a lot of cold air with it, or just below average temperatures, shot of cool air. And then the warmer colors you see on your screen, like the yellows, the oranges, the reds, I mean, that's a ridge, high pressure ridging above average temperatures. And a lot of times, not always, that can mean calmer conditions, but not always. So we're going to start this off by the end of this weekend. This is Sunday evening. We got this upper level low, this Pacific low. You can call it many things, but a storm system that's going to swing into the southwest. Maybe you can bring some rain for these areas that have not seen hardly any rain since like October in the southwest. But this thing kind of meanders across the southwest. At the same time, you see this, deep trough up here over central to eastern Canada. This is bringing some cold air shots into the northeast, which is why you see this over the northeast, leaning towards below average temperatures. And it makes sense because we have this persistent trough that continues to swing down out of central and eastern Canada and affect the northeastern portion of the country, which, sticks out like a sore thumb, kind of like Florida, right? So you continue to move this forward, and this trough, this continues to swing down energy, cold air, and then as this thing going to eject, we get into early next week, this thing finally begins to kind of just move across the southern tier of the country, and you got this persistent cold air source. So think of it like this. We got energy riding down this trough that continues to kind of swing down here. And then we have this energy right here that's beginning to move east. So if this energy, which is probably precipitation, kind of can get into this region right here, then we got a cold air source to kind of funnel it here. And one thing I forgot to do here is I forgot to pull up my Epic pen, so I'm just going to do it here on the fly. Let's get that, let's get that, let's get this, and let's bring it on back up. Okay. All right, let's continue to move this forward here. And as we move, and this is the latest GFS, and this is the time frame I begin to like. We start to get into next Wednesday. We start to get into next Thursday. All right, so this blue blob is starting to inch closer. That's probably some sort of storm system. We probably got a lot of energy that's probably shooting out ahead of this. So we're probably getting this southwesterly flow. We probably got energy coming through here. This is probably bringing rain. Definitely not snow, but who knows? A little bit of cold air kind of coming down here like this on the western side of this trough. Who knows? Maybe you get a little winter weather kind of right into here, but not going to focus too much on the specifics at all in this video. But you continue to move forward here, and at this point, we basically get this trough, and we'll kind of take a larger look at this. We get this trough that begins to sort of retreat back into the Atlantic. But one thing you don't see here is there's energy right here because of this low. So it's probably some energy maybe hanging out sort of down here, and you can't see it. That's why, you don't get too stuck on the fact that there's a ridge right here or anything like that, because you can still have some moisture. And then we have what we call a 50-50 low, and this is probably trying to bring some cold air down into here. Now, I know that's kind of confusing. When you have the 50-50 low kind of setups where it's like a Miller B, CAD storm, cold air damming, it's very tough to explain when you're looking at the blues and the reds on this screen. But what I want you to really take from this here is this. You have this trough hanging around kind of between day 7 and day 10. You got this area of blue down here, which is some sort of storm system. It's going to try to catch up with this cold air source. And who knows, maybe you run another winter storm chance. I would say more so for like these areas right into here. I know, I went all the way down to South Carolina, but I'm going to show you what I mean here in a second. So that's it, kind of explaining the setup somewhat, and I know that's kind of difficult to really understand. It's not always the easiest to explain, but cold air source to the northeast, moisture hanging out to the south. You don't have that big push of cold air like from the north. It's kind of that 50-50 low setup that's kind of pivoting cold air into the northeast down the eastern side of the Appalachian Mountains. So what does that all look like at the surface? Let's just look at one GFS run. First off, with persistent cold air coming down here into the northeast and the Great Lakes region, and just a little small short waves, you're going to have the opportunity for maybe, some little bit of energy kind of meeting some cold air sort of in maybe the central Apps, southern Apps, so maybe it's a little bit of snow. One area that really has not seen a big winter storm, which is actually good news, is like western North Carolina. Western North Carolina has kind of just gotten the northwest flow events. You've missed to the south a couple times. It seems like the weather is throwing you guys a bone, because I know there's a lot of people that, are still without their houses, or there's probably still people living in tents up there. You guys have yet to get hit by, this big old winter storm yet, which you typically seem to get at least every few years. But here we go. We continue to move forward here, and we just continue to have a lot of northern stream energy. Pieces of energy diving down this trough I just broke down. So here's a clipper that dives down. At the same time, here's all that moisture from that blue blob I just talked about to the south over the southern sections of the U.S. and the southwest. This is bringing some moisture. And this is what I'm talking about. That 540 line, there's some moisture hanging out here. It tries to get close to that cold air. And the latest GFS kind of keeps it going. A blast of cold air dives down, suppresses the moisture to the south. Man, it just looks really rainy down here at the end of January, the last few days of January. About a week from today, a lot of moisture down here. But there's a lot of cold air close by too. Like, you actually start to get some winter weather that starts to break out over, it's not a forecast, over western Texas. But this is a lot of moisture just south of the 540 line, which is in the 32-degree line at the surface, but cold air aloft. Just think of it like that. And then, does this moisture ever eject? We actually got a snowstorm breaking out over central Texas. And then check it out. The cold air is hanging out, around enough to meet up with this moisture in South Carolina. And in this particular run, and it'll change a million times, you got winter weather breaking out over South Carolina. But, if you stop it here, right, and you look at the 500 millibar chart, you would say, how in the world do you get winter weather out of this look? I just see a bunch of reds dominating the screen. But you got to think a lot of times these blue blobs bring their own cold air source. This is really just upper level low driven. You still have that cold air source up here. So this is kind of swinging down cold air down into here on the back side of this trough, the western side. There's a lot of moisture kind of hanging out down here. That's why this is incredibly tough to explain to you guys, the audience. But, and you kind of go back to this, you go back to that right there, and you're like, man, well, how does that image that I just saw show up as this? Kind of a wintry look at the surface, right? Well, you can see how sort of and I'm going to kind of do this right here. You see how all the blue lines are kind of buckling up like this? They're kind of going like that, and like this, like that. Like that. You can tell that's the cold air source coming from the northeast. And you think, oh man, we're about to have another winter storm between day 7 and day 10 for South Carolina. Well, the energy is there, but it just kind of gets pushed down and it finally fully ejects. And then you got a big winter storm getting closer to the day 9 and 10 point, breaking out across the Midwest and the plains, because that intense cold air source to the north begins to kind of retreat. Therefore, a lot of energy can blast through. So I will tell you, the GFS has been flirting at this for the last few runs. This is the run from like last night. Showed a big winter storm. Same time frame, a little bit later. Not a forecast, but the GFS has been liking the idea of this. Wow, that stinks. I just exited out of my Euro run. So we're going to have to do this on the fly. Let's do this. Now, what does the Euro show? Old reliable, right? Does the Euro show kind of something similar? Well, I would say it does. You got a lot of cold air kind of diving down to this area, a lot of clippers. And then you can see, here it comes. Here comes our energy building here. There's all that rain about 5 to 7 days from now. Does it meet up with any cold air? We're getting between day 7 and day 10. It's just a miss on timing. Okay, so we get about to day 9, day 10. the energy finally ejects, and you actually do get a little bit of cold air damming, a little bit of icing in the North Carolina mountains, and it does eventually turn to a big whopper of a winter storm across areas of the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. But it really misses the timing for areas far to the south. We got another cold air blast that really moves in behind it on the Euro, but that's so far out, it's hard to focus on the details of that. So it's kind of there on the Euro too. You got the energy there. This southwest wave, if you will, this upper level low, Pacific low, ejects and moves in. And we got the cold air up here, but the timing is missed with the cold air and the moisture. So what about the signal in the GFS ensemble? Can you see the footprint of anything of the system we just broke down? Let's move it forward here. We're going to start off early next week. We get into midway next week, and here it is. You can see the footprint. You can see what's going on pretty well here, honestly. Off just the GFS ensemble as far as snow. You can see that you have a northern stream dominated setup up here with this trough, bringing in a lot of clippers. You can see the footprint of clippers right here. And then you can see this little upper level low bringing its own cold air, which it definitely can do in January, dumping some snow across the central and especially the southern Rockies. And then you can see how this footprint kind of connects as we get into here. You see how there's a little bit of a connection here, and we start to get into about February 1. And there's that little bit of a signal for some winter weather as we get the last couple days of January into February across the Mid-Atlantic, heck, even the upper southeast, northern North Carolina, into the northeast. Now, not a super hyped up signal or anything like that, but certainly something there. Now the the Euro ensemble, same thing. You can see the footprint of clippers right in here. And then you can see our southwest energy right here building in. Do you see a signal here? You do. You see this like little bit of a signal right into here. Plus you got the Midwest stuff right here. Now this is getting into about the day 8 to day 11 time frame, but you see the little bit of a signal for snow all the way down to the mountains of Tennessee, North Carolina, heck, a little bit of signal all the way into Georgia and South Carolina. But to me, the setup, if you're going to get any winter weather pretty far south, screams ice. So obviously we're not just going to hyper-focus on the south, but, you know, I really think the pattern could support coming up some icing for Georgia, the Carolinas. You see this ice signal here. This is the Euro ensemble, blends a bunch of members together, creates an average, and a lot of these members do show ice in northern Georgia, northern sections of South Carolina, and I will show you guys a little bit further to the north here. Move this in time, and I mean, heck, it even has an ice signal all the way up to New York City. So, I mean, that's a hefty signal. I would say at the day 10-ish, give or take a day, for cold air damming. You notice this is the Appalachian Mountains right into here. Let's draw something right here. Here's the Apps right in here, kind of the highest areas. Definitely did not draw that correctly. Kind of the highest areas right, you know, into here. Okay? So you notice most of that pink is on the eastern side. That, to me, that screams cold air damming, which supports the 500 millibar chart that we just broke down. So we'll continue to try to figure this one out. You know, I just spent a lot of time on that, but it's not, I will tell you, it's not worth doing 2 videos a day on. We're going to take a break on doing that. But if this signal starts to increase as we start to get into, say, this weekend, into a later portion of this weekend, then of course it's going to be worth starting to hyper focus on. But I don't think we're done with winter in the South. I know February has just been an early extension of spring for a lot of areas. But it just seems like it just wants to be cold this year in the eastern U.S. And it's hard to fully break loose a pattern. It's kind of like when you get entrenched into a ridge-dominated pattern. It's very hard to break that pattern. It's just like it's literally like it digs its roots, and you really just got to uproot it, which takes a lot of work. So we just want to be cold in the central and eastern U.S. this winter, which is rare. You haven't seen that in a while. But speaking on today's weather, glad to be back to this. All these alerts down here in the southeast, this is special weather statements, cold air advisories. We got extreme cold warnings. We got some winter, we don't have any winter weather advisories. We got freeze warnings. A lot of the special weather statements are just due to black ice and cold weather advisories for obvious things like, I mean, the fact that it's cold, it's frigid in the southeast, might have some record-breaking lows. We do have some winter weather advisories up for around Buffalo and the Tug Hill Plateau. They'll expire tomorrow for a little bit of lake effect action. Same thing for, off Lake Michigan, Lake Superior. And then we have some winter weather advisories across Montana for some northern stream energy. It's going to dig down. And we do have some freeze warnings and frost advisories and stuff that like over there for California. Still trying to get my energy back, guys, but I'm getting there. But cold weather advisories in areas of Oregon also and New Mexico. So it's quite cold across the entire country. Now, speaking of risk for any thunderstorms, absolutely not. It's just not a pattern that supports anything in the way of severe weather. It's been a pretty calm as far as any kind of severe weather outbreaks or severe weather for quite some time now. And the risk of excessive rainfall, none of that either. So remains pretty quiet. The southeast today, the only thing where I would say, hey, watch out for, I wouldn't be surprised we get a little bit of freezing drizzle. Like this is for this afternoon. This morning, really, for the Georgia, the Carolina coastline, I would watch out for that. Obviously, if temperatures do warm above freezing, then it'll just be some rain. But watch out for some just freezing drizzle along the Carolina coastline, Georgia coastline this afternoon. Well, really this morning into early this afternoon. Once upon a time, this low pressure was showing to move inland. I don't know if you guys remember that, talking about the last storm system. I would kind of throw this a bone too, but it trended a little bit more out to sea, and it did not end up affecting us inland. So, but the rest of the southeast, I wouldn't be surprised. We get some flurries flying around in maybe Tennessee today. But we'll see what happens with that. But it's a quiet day. It's a day for cleanup. Maybe you'll get some melting out there, but it still remains cold, so the melting is not going to be rapid. Heck, I got an inch of snow. Only got an inch of snow, and I was surprised by the time nighttime fell yesterday that there was still as much snow on the ground as there was. It was only an inch. But the Northeast, we got a lot of northern stream energy just kind of flying down. Here's that system that barely misses, like Nantucket, Southeast, Cape Cod, places like that, but it is going to miss. We're going to have just some lake-enhanced energy coming off Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, just some flurries flying around this evening across Ohio, getting into West Virginia, even Kentucky, western PA. We'll just get some snow showers. And then we could get a more robust lake effect snow band that kind of comes off Lake Ontario into the Tug Hill Plateau later tonight. I don't really think it maintains itself much, but it could actually begin to affect areas like near Rochester. You typically don't see the orientation of this like this, but could get a little bit of snow maybe closer to Syracuse, Rochester. We'll see what happens as we're getting into tomorrow. Not expecting much snow today up here in the Northeast, just cold. The south central U.S., Louisiana getting the historic winter storm they got, just unreal stuff. We mentioned before the storm started a couple days ago that this will be a system that kids will not forget, and I think that needs to be nailed down because it's certainly a system that maybe we created a lot of future weather nerds from that storm. That would be awesome. The more that I do the weather, the more I realize that there's a lot of people that are interested in the weather out there than what you would think. I got a neighborhood kid here. His name's Benjamin. And they watch my videos, so maybe he's hearing this part. I doubt it because I'm talking about in the Southern Plains area. But, I found out he's pretty interested in the weather, and it's always cool. He's like my neighbor. So, but anyways, moving forward here, could get some flurries across Kansas today, but, not a whole lot of anything today in the south central U.S. Things have calmed down quite a bit. And then the north central U.S., just some lake effect stuff. Lake Superior, lower Michigan. We're just going to get some lake effect snows. It's going to kind of come off the lakes, and there'll be some lake-to-lake connection right here from a lake, almost said Lake Supreme. Lake Superior, well, it is the Supreme Lake. Lake Superior down to Lake Michigan. Some lake-to-lake connection there. And we'll just get several inches of snow at most from this. And then we'll get a clipper that dives in. This will bring some blustery conditions, some blustery snow, and it'll dive down here tomorrow morning into early tomorrow afternoon and probably drop some light snowfall accumulations all the way through tomorrow night. But snowfall between now and the next 24 hours. Marquette, a couple inches, but once you get east of Marquette, in this kind of whitish shade color, that's upwards to maybe a half a foot of snow, certainly possible in these areas. And then we'll kind of go down to lower Michigan, and this is what it looks like for this area. Some areas could get that 6 to 8 inches of snow over the next 48 hours. So some light snowfall accumulations for the rest of lower Michigan. The western U.S. today, as we get into this evening, some snow will drift down out of Canada. Look at the snow up in Montana. Not a big storm by any means, but could get some gusty conditions, snow flying around. Karen, you can get some snow up here later tonight. Loyal viewer up here in Montana, and then some snow flying around Idaho, Wyoming, and then we take it into tomorrow morning, and some of this energy will make it all the way down to Colorado, Utah, places like that. Snowfall between now and the next 48 hours. Several inches will add up in those higher elevations, but those kind of lower valley areas, Great Falls, inch. Missoula, 2 to 3 inches of snow. Billings, an inch, inch and a half. So not a whole lot from the system at all, but definitely a little bit of snow. And here's a look at Wyoming, and then here's a look at Colorado just over the next 48 hours. So temperatures, another cold one, but you're going to definitely get some melting today. In fact, some areas will get well into the 40s that, got about 8 to 12 inches of snow. Some areas, especially along the coastal regions of, I would say Jacksonville all the way up to like Virginia Beach, Norfolk, you're going to struggle to get out in the 30s because of cloud cover from the system offshore. But the entire Northeast locked below freezing. Once you get into the Midwest, well below freezing. And just 40s and 50s everywhere else across the South. And this is what it looks like across the West. Cold across the Rockies, but it's actually pretty nice across the Southwest. So, guys, that's all I got. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all, and I'll try to get called up with stuff later on today. Talk to you soon.